My team has to trust me as a leader to know that I'm steering the ship in the right direction. And then I have to trust them with their responsibilities so that they can help scale and build the business and build the operations. Because if you want to be a multi-million-dollar company, you can't do it all by yourself.
Welcome to the Love Your Brand podcast. If you're looking for real conversations with real people, you're the right place. Let's go!
Let's go. Welcome to the Love Your Brand show, powered by TalenAlexander, your creative and marketing firm. Welcome today. We got Mr. Ben Cao. That nailed it. Oh, yeah. Awesome. As the founder of Carbon Marine Sports Group, Ben's multicultural background, have Chinese, born in Hong Kong, and raised in mainland China, has been a driving force for diversity and inclusion. Carbon Marine's mission is to provide a platform for athletes of all backgrounds to share their voices with the world. They aim to represent the diverse roster of athletes and create opportunities for them to make meaningful impacts on their communities, and to create opportunities for partnerships that amplify their platforms. Ben's passion for sports permeates the fabric of Carbon Marine Sports. Welcome, Ben.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Hope I got that right, man.
Spot on.
Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, man.
So let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about your story. I see, born in Hong Kong, raised in mainland China. Give us that history.
Yeah, so I come from a multicultural family. My father is Chinese. My mother is Caucasian from North Carolina. So my father came over from China in the early 80s to study seminary and become an ordained minister. While he was over here in the States studying, he met my mom, and they went into ministry together. And ultimately, once my father became a ordained minister, he went back to China to build churches and spread the gospel in China. And so while my parents were living over in China, my older brother and I were born. We stayed in China until 2003. And then the SARS epidemic broke out, which was the precursor to COVID. People didn't know back in 2003 that this virus could be a precursor for the pandemic to come. But when that broke out in China, we moved to the US, moved to Greensboro, North Carolina. And my mom ended up wanting to stay in Greensboro. Have a lot of family in North Carolina. This is where she's originally from. So we had spent 8 years in China, moved to Greensboro, and I, finished up school in Greensboro, went up to App State to get a degree in business. And then after I graduated from App State, my beautiful wife and I moved down to Charlotte, and we've been here for the last 7 years.
Amazing.
Wow. Yeah. The Mountaineers, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my wife is a Mountaineer.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful
Go Neers.
campus.
Yeah.
Beautiful campus.
Yeah.
We're making a lot of changes to it, though. I don't know if I like them. I'm a little bit adverse to change. I have a lot of nostalgia and some great memories at different buildings and restaurants that have been closing down, getting knocked down, and they're building a lot of new stuff in Boone.
You remember Sticky Boys?
Stick Boy Cafe.
Stick Boy
yeah.
Cafe.
They got the best cookies in the world, man.
She worked there for several years.
That's awesome.
Every time we visit, she's got to get some sticky buns and just a variety of cookies and things of that nature. And I hear the blast from the past, the full story, how she used to walk there at 4 in the morning to open up. But one thing she always says is, seeing all those changes, she wishes that she could go back just for like a year, because she felt like she really didn't use the campus to its full potential. There's so much cool stuff going on there, right? She was just like working and going to school and going out to bars and whatnot. I guess that's what you do in college, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But she was like, man, I wish I was more involved in everything they had, because it really is a cool campus.
It's a cool campus, and there's such beautiful nature around there.
Yeah.
All the different hiking trails, Grandfather Mountain, Profile Trail.
I can always breathe a little easier.
Oh, yeah.
I always say I'm a mountain man at heart.
Yeah,
So.
I spent a lot of time hiking through the Appalachian Trail up there.
Cool. So you came back, you're in Greensboro, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How did you end up in Charlotte?
So when my wife and I graduated from college, she actually went to North Carolina State.
Oh,
We were just looking for job opportunities. And so Charlotte's where we ended up. I was working at Wells Fargo at the time, doing database management. My wife got a degree in textile engineering. And so or textile technology, sorry. And she got a job in textile manufacturing down in Clover, South Carolina. So we picked Charlotte as the closest metropolitan area to settle down.
Awesome. Is she still in Clover?
No. So now she has a really, really cool job. She handles all of the YouTube creator awards for YouTube at a company called Society Awards. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. She has a very fun job. She's always communicating with different creators when they hit that 100,000 million subscriber milestone.
We'll be there shortly.
So do we have any in on the secret sauce? Well, what is that? What is that?
So there's a few different secret sauces to growing a following on YouTube. Thumbnails, number one. Having a catchy thumbnail that when people are scrolling through, they'll stop and look at that image, that little square as your thumbnail and say, oh, that looks interesting. And then the second is going to be your meta tags, because that's going to filter into the YouTube algorithm. And then the third is having a title that matches that thumbnail that's also catchy and attention grabbing. And those are kind of the three pillars that Mr. Beast used to build such a huge platform on YouTube, that Jinxie and Sketch have used to build such a following on YouTube. And they've got millions and millions of subscribers. So it's been replicated by multiple different YouTubers. So that's kind of the not so secret sauce at this point.
I don't know. I think I would.
What's up, brother?
Yeah. Okay.
We should try and get him on the podcast. You'd like him.
I definitely know Mr. Beast, and I'll watch a podcast about his thumbnail creation.
Yeah.
And how many visions he would go through and how much money he would spend. I was just like, what?
And it's good sometimes to try different thumbnails on one video. If it's not performing well, don't be afraid to switch it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's doing something really cool with AI technology to translate all of his videos into other languages. And he has separate channels now, Mr. Beast Espanol, Mr. Beast Portuguese, Mr. Beast Chinese. And he just translates all of his same video content, just translates the audio using AI technology into other languages.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's really extended his reach.
Yeah, that's a lot more inclusive.
Yeah. He just had primarily a US based following. Now he's a global brand.
Yeah, he's huge, man.
Yeah,
he's
that's really impressive.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So you were at Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
Doing data analysis.
Yeah.
What you said?
Yeah. Database analytics.
So where do you go from there? Where do you segue out of database analytics into what you're doing?
I left Wells Fargo and got a job at a marketing agency called Omnicom Media Group. And I started there using my database analytics skills to analyze marketing data. So we were building all sorts of different spreadsheets, different dashboards in Tableau, Google, Power BI, and all sorts of different data visualization tools to take the data and try to tell a story with it for marketing, right? And say, hey, all right, you've got all these impressions, all these clicks on social media, on YouTube, on different channels. How do you translate that data into something a little bit more than just numbers, ones and zeros? And so that's how I got my foot in the door with marketing. And at Omnicom Media Group, I got the pleasure of working on Disney. I got to work on Wells Fargo. I got to work on Longchamp, luxury bags, all sorts of different brands, and learn different marketing strategies for different industries. But with that same through line of how do we take this data and how we tell a story out of it? Because you can go back to a CMO, you can go back to a director of marketing and say, well, we got you 18 million impressions this month. We got you 45,000 clicks. You have this click-through rate. But how does that tell a story of brand perception? How does that tell a story of consumer engagement? What are people actually getting out of those impressions? And how does that benefit the brand? What objectives is that solving? And so that's kind of how I started to develop my omni-channel marketing skills, and ultimately parlay that experience into building marketing company, Carpentering Consulting.
That's interesting how you're using that data to tell a story, right? And explain it to the C-suite. Because sometimes that's a hard sell, depending on the entity. If you're a small to medium-sized business, they're laser focused on marketing. You know, what are we doing in the market? What's the conversion? What's the CPC? What's the CTR? What's this? How much revenue are we generating? And it's all about ROI. But there's also a separate fold of branding. That's longevity. That's telling your story. It's what they say about you when you're not in the room. That takes years to build. That it is hard to directly connect it to growth, directly connected to sales, directly connected to every KPI in your organization. But it is connected, right? In some form or fashion to every KPI in your organization, especially internally, your culture. That's branding as well. You've got your external and your internal. So that is always, it's such an interesting thing. I mean, how have you found that, you know, going through data and analytics to the C-suite, but you know there's a sector for branding that you really can't correlate with data, right? But you know it's impacting the brand.
Yeah, and that's a really difficult conversation to have if you haven't, you know, found ways to have attribution to brand, right? Because that brand identity doesn't really live in the data. And so what we've started to do is look at consumer opinion surveys and look at brand surveys to see, all right, how is the brand name and that brand identity impacting brand perception in ways that we can look at some data and say, all right, we have a portion of your consumer base that we've surveyed and we're analyzing how they feel and what their responses are to certain questions that coincide with their exposure to different marketing campaigns and different marketing channels. And so we're trying to tie that back in because otherwise it's all subjective and just based off the way each individual thinks that their brand looks and that their brand sounds and that different brand voice piece is understood within an organization, but without understanding that consumer perception and consumer perspective.
Yeah, and depending on who you get in the C-suite, right? Certain CFO, the board of directors, if they're all looking at the bottom line and what they're putting out and what it's generating, that gray area, that growth in brand perception and return, that is a hard conversation to have. And it's like, they're like, wow, we spent, you know, 10 million this year on this, you know, on all this, and we got this return. This is what was trackable, you know, what? No, let's find something else, right? Let's do something else. This isn't really helping, but in all honesty, it may be, right? If you could tie it into maybe your internal churn rate, right? How your close rate. Look at other KPIs in your industry and look at how it's affecting that. You can find measurable results when you are building a strong brand and you have good client acquisition, right? And attrition.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm always interested in the data, but there's also that, you know, just that space that you've got to discuss. And sometimes it's a hard conversation to have. And I feel really, really blessed when I'm talking to a business or a brand and they get it, right? Because it's a constant uphill battle with companies that don't get it. You know, it's all about marketing, especially if it's budgetary concerns.
Exactly.
And I always say, they always wait a little bit. Companies wait when they're doing really well. They should invest in their brand equity, right? I feel like a lot of companies wait till they reach a certain pain threshold. When something happens, when their sales drops 30% over 2 years, they're in reactive mode. You know, their funds are really tight. They really need to know every dollar they put out is bringing back to, right? That's a hard place to be in for any company. So my biggest message that I'm actively trying to get out there is be proactive in your branding. Invest in it when things are going well. You know, this year you have companies that are having record year. You know, last year they had record years. Some companies not so great, but the year prior they were doing fantastic, but they didn't invest. Now they're like, well, hold on. Our brand visibility footprint, you know, we need to invest in it now. But I'm like, hey, well, why'd you wait? Right? There wasn't enough pain.
And a big piece of that too is keeping your finger on the pulse for what competitors are doing.
Absolutely.
With branding and market share and share of voice in your particular industry. I do a lot of work in the CPG and beverage industry. And so I've been keeping an eye on what Logan Paul and KSI have been doing with Prime and how they're able to disrupt and compete with some of the bigger, larger established brands who've been around for over 100 years. They're coming in using influencer marketing, using organic social media to really capture a lot of that market share that these larger companies are slower to move in. And they don't want to be first to market, and they don't want to be an innovator in some of these new channels because there's a way that they've always done things. And so larger organizations are slower to move and adopt. And then 2, they do want to keep an eye on competitors and see what works and what doesn't work and then move on that. But a lot of the time, if you're not nimble and you're not quick to act, you'll miss the boat. And then you've got guys who've taken years to build social followings and invested in new channels that you now have to catch up. It's not an overnight success. It's really been built on 10 to 15 years of building a following and building a community that they have now just monetized into a brand.
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, some companies are like, we're too small to be different, right? We're too this. We can't compete with the big boys. Well, in actuality, a lot of the big guys, you know, that methodology is going away. Right. You see it in the ad world, like traditional agencies are far in between. Right. They're merging with their smaller digital partners. They're selling this. They're doing this because of the overhead, because of the hourly fees. Right. It's all value based, value based. It's coming up with a product that, you know, you can scope out and say, here's a value based price deliverable that you're getting for X amount. You know, I truly believe I'm done with tracking time. I'm done with trading time for money. We do have a few hourly things going on, but it makes me cringe, just to be honest with you. I think in every service-based business, every industry, I mean, you even see it in the legal field. They're going to flat fee. I mean, they're getting away from the hourly model, especially with AI technology and things of all this coming into play. It's more about value-based deliverables. It's not how long it takes you, how many people, you know, it takes to implement it. It's what is the end result? What is the goal? What are you looking for? Right. And deliver that. I don't care if it takes you a day or if it takes you 2 weeks. Same way if I have an issue with my washer, right? If I can't fix it, I just want it fixed. You know, if a guy comes in and says, I'm going to charge you $300. Great. He spends 3 minutes on it. He taps it around and heads out. Great. I paid you for your experience. You came in, you knew exactly where to hit the washer to get it working, right? And not that he had to spend 3 hours at $100 an hour. That perception, I think, is slowly fading away, and that a lot of companies are kind of having to catch up,
right?
Because the overhead is just so awful.
Yeah. My favorite way to structure those pricing models is based off success, right? And I go to clients and I say, hey, pay me a percentage of the success from these marketing campaigns. And so it also gets that business owner or that CMO in the mindset of reinvesting and growing with their marketing. Because you touched on it earlier. It's don't wait until you've had a drop in sales. Continue to reinvest in your marketing on the way up, because that's how you're going to continue that growth trajectory. And I like to structure deals with clients that way because it takes some of the risk off of them up front as well. Instead of doing an hourly or a flat fee, we can say, hey, we're going to start small and pay a percentage of the revenue driven by this marketing campaign. And as it continues to succeed, we'll reinvest more and more budget into the marketing dollars. And as that marketing campaign continues to drive sales, we all grow together. They make more money.
Yeah.
Carbon Ring makes more money.
Yeah.
They also will see it as your partner coming in instead of somebody that's just trying to profit off them as a company. Exactly. So I think they know, oh, Ben's coming in and he's not going to do well unless we do well. So he's going to be able to put that effort in.
It's I follow Chris though. I love that dude. He's a genius. He's about my age. He has a little short on video creation. A guy's like, hey, I want you to create a video. He's like, okay, it'd be 10 grand. He's like, man, I got $1,000. He was like, okay, I'll tell you what if I take 10% of everything that all the revenue it generates, from walk-in traffic to everybody, you know, that sees the video and clicks through. And then he was like, hold on, because then he realized that may be a lot more than $10,000, right? So it's also on the flip side, if you got some really smart people in the boat, that you can, by doing that model, you can generate a whole lot more revenue. And as long as there's transparency, right, on both sides. I've seen it kind of two ways. I've kind of worked that angle before, but then their eyes got big because they're like, well, hold on, this could generate like $500,000. Hold on. No, I'd rather pay the 10 grand. Like, okay, 10 grand flat fee. You got it. It's just funny just seeing that, you know, just seeing that come to mind whenever you do pitch that. But some people love it.
I've been through that, where once the paychecks start getting real big, they want to come and renegotiate. They're like, all right, can we get this down to a flat fee where you continue to manage the marketing for us, but for a specific retainer instead of a percentage, because the percentage has gotten to be quite a big number. The
How do you react to that?
Doesn't change. It depends on the client. And so, depending on where they are in their business life and how much time and effort it's taken me, I'm more than happy to do what's the best thing for the client based off of their financials. And so in some cases, I will renegotiate and say, hey, if it makes sense and I can offload some of this work to my team as well, we can accept more of that flat fee model. And it frees me up to do other things with building my own brand and focusing on company culture and building my team.
Absolutely.
Versus being as personally invested, like you're saying, as more of a partner than a marketing agency.
Now, do you find, I know I have, since the market of marketing has become so saturated, right? I feel like everybody's a marketer now, right? They see videos, they're like, oh, I know how to do this, I could do this. And there's such a wide gamut of services that are kind of low tier priced and kind of very high tier priced, but they're all kind of somewhat speaking the same symbiotic language, but they're not all equal, right? And I think sometimes that's the hardest thing that I found, is the education part is when they see something like, oh, this company does SEO for $500, but this is 2,000, right? You know what? Why are you so much higher? And you're just like, well, I can show you a company that charges 5,000 or 10,000. Right. You know, why are they so much higher? So I found that as the market has become so saturated, I feel like brands and, you know, it could be C-suite or whoever looks over the bottom line, they're constantly looking for that next best thing because they're being marketed to on a daily basis. Let's face it, the internet is noisy. Your device is noisy. I'm constantly on a daily basis getting hit with advertising opportunities, people wanting to advertise my company. And sometimes I look at the price, I'm like, what is this? Is this legit? And, you know, I don't know. Maybe some of them are. But I found that's been a big conversation I've had to have, you know, I think in the last 2 years more often than not, because there's so many other companies reaching out to them, you know, wanting that work. I don't know if it's the market or what. Cold outreach. Do
you also feel competing on price is not the best strategy? Because there can always be someone cheaper. It's absolutely, you know,
always.
Yeah, and I've gotten a lot of advice from other entrepreneurs and other people in the marketing industry telling me that should not be my value prop is price. It should be other elements and other aspects of the business. I'm still kind of in between because I feel like in order to win business, price has to be a factor. I don't have the credibility or the longevity of a larger agency, and I definitely don't have the resources of a larger agency to warrant charging larger price tags for different marketing services. And so as I'm building the team and as we're structuring how we're going to position ourselves in the market, price is certainly a factor. But I'd say the best piece of advice that I've gotten is from Jim Bailey, who's the founder and president and CEO of Red Moon Marketing, who's been my longest client. he said the number one thing that has helped him succeed, and it's helped me succeed in marketing as well, is developing that relationship with the client and establishing trust, because you can't put a price tag on trust. And marketing is very trust-based because you can never guarantee the results. It's always come to the table with really thoughtful, creative ideas, have a very strong attention to detail with your implementation. But at the end of the day, when CMOs or CFOs, decision makers are signing the check to fund the marketing, it's all based on trust that the marketing strategy will ultimately turn into some new revenue generated for their company.
Yeah, and I think that's why I tend to shy away from, the guarantees. I see a lot of marketing companies using that language now, and I'm like, yeah, I guess there's some guarantees, but some of them are quite lofty. But like you said, you can come with the most brilliant ideas and competitive analysis and research, and yeah, this should hit. But maybe it doesn't, right? You got to try some different things. I feel like that model is still there. I feel like companies like ours, like the agency field has lost their creative edge. Because companies think that when you come to someone and they specialize in a particular field or niche or whatnot, that their solution will be successful. I like to say that's 100% true, right? But we all know that it's not.
Right.
Every company and brand is not the same at its core. They might use the same language, look the same way, talk the same way, but it's all about the community and the audience and how you build that audience. And that's the differentiator that I found.
Absolutely.
Ben, let's go back to, so you segue to the agency, right? And then I think you told me this story before. Is that when you got the call at this agency that from someone in the motor?
So in NASCAR, yeah. So that came a little bit later. I had left the agency. I was working at Lending Tree in their marketing department.
Yes.
And so I had a NASCAR driver, reach out to me and ask if Lending Tree could sponsor his car. I was in performance marketing at the time, running lead generation campaigns. So I wasn't really as much on the branding and sponsorship side. So I told this guy, hey, this isn't really my field, but I'll, get you in contact with our branding officer and our director of brand marketing and see if there's anything available for you there. So I make the introduction. I sit in on a couple meetings with them, have some conversations about how that's going to go. And ultimately, Lending Tree decided that they were sponsoring bowl games and doing other stuff. They weren't going to get into NASCAR at that time. But I developed a relationship with this NASCAR driver. His name is Nick Sanchez. He's a phenomenal, talented driver. And he needed additional help with finding sponsorships. And so I said, hey, why don't I just continue to help introduce you to different people at different companies that I've either worked with or have relationships with to see if they'd be interested in sponsoring your car. And so I was going out and bird dogging opportunities for them and making some introductions. And I thought to myself, this could actually be a legitimate business. There seems to be a need for this in motorsports, because I was talking to Nick and some of the other drivers, and they're saying there's not a lot of representation for drivers. They either rely on their family connections or rely on the team that they're signed to bring in sponsors. But that team doesn't necessarily have any sort of allegiance or loyalty to a driver. They could cut a driver and replace them because they hold that relationship with the sponsor, and the drivers can be interchangeable in that car. And so I saw an opportunity to create a marketing company and a sports representation company that was more driver focused, and really focused on connecting drivers with sponsors and opening up opportunities for NASCAR drivers. And so that's when I started Carpentering Sports Group in 2021.
2021.
Yeah.
3 years old.
3 years old. So I'll back up a little bit and tell you how I started carpentering consulting and how that kind of transitioned and my journey as an entrepreneur. So in 2020, we all got the news about the COVID pandemic, and Lending Tree said, hey, we're shutting down our office. Everyone go take your laptops and work from home. And so I was working from home when Nick Sanchez hit me up about NASCAR sponsorships. And so while I was working from home and trying to understand this pandemic landscape and environment that we're in, I started to see small businesses in our community struggle really badly because they had to shut down their brick and mortar operations, and they're not necessarily equipped to transition into online sales and digital marketing. And well, that was my expertise, is marketing data, digital marketing, and translating digital marketing into sales and revenue opportunities for businesses of any size. And so right at the beginning of the pandemic, I said, hey, I've got an opportunity here to help small businesses in Charlotte stay afloat. And so that's when I started up marketing consulting as a freelancer, not really understanding that I was taking my first step into owning my own business and entrepreneurship. And so I just wanted to do it as, hey, I've got some free time on my hands now that I don't have to commute to work. I can get my job done at LendingTree done in a shorter period of time working from home. I've got all this free time on my hands. Let me see how I can consult and help other businesses in Charlotte. And so that's how I got connected with Red Moon Marketing, because their primary source of income was event marketing. And so all of their events got canceled because of COVID. And so I sat down with Jim Bailey, the president and CEO of Red Moon, and I said, hey, I think between the personnel that you have, the opportunities that you have with your clients, and the new opportunity with digital marketing, we can pivot a lot of this event marketing budget and event marketing strategy into digital experiences and start to combine what they were doing with physical in-person events with digital experiences. And so we would create bartending classes online for Jack Daniels instead of having a physical bartending event. We would have digital gamification and other digital experiences built out for Coca-Cola so that fans could continue to engage with Coca-Cola racing or Coca-Cola partnerships with universities and translate all of that over to the digital environment. So that's how I got started consulting on the digital marketing side with Carbon Ring Consulting 4 years ago, and then had already taken that step of building my own business and taking that leap of faith, quitting my job at LendingTree to go off on my own and start the route of entrepreneurship. And then that's where I got keyed into NASCAR and was starting to make that transition.
Wow. So
started Carbon Ring Sports Group.
So Carbon Ring Consulting was developed before Carbon Ring Sports Group.
Correct.
How'd you come up with the name? I thought that was like a motorsports Carbon Ring.
No. So I was going to name the company Cao Consulting, and I Googled it and looked into it, and it seemed that almost every consulting firm was last name consulting. And I wanted to set myself apart, set the brand apart off the gate. And so I was sitting down one day brainstorming, what can I name this company that's not just my last name consulting firm? And so I was thinking about things that inspire me, things that motivate me, sources of support in my life. And I look down and I'm fidgeting with my wedding ring, and it's a carbon ring. It's made of carbon fiber and gold. And so I thought this would be a great homage to my number one supporter in life, my beautiful wife, Jenny, and also tell a story of, you know, where I come from and the level of, you know, trust and support and commitment that I want to put into this brand. I feel like that connects in with this carbon ring that I wear on my finger.
Wow.
That's an amazing story.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then anytime someone asks me about it, I get to shout out my beautiful wife too and say how supportive she is and how I wouldn't be where I am and the companies wouldn't be where they are today without her love and support.
That's awesome. So I wanted to know, how did you transition from motorsports? You said you mentioned to NIL deals and helping diversify, you know, college sports and athletes.
Absolutely. So it was really, one, a stroke of luck, which I feel like a lot of businesses encounter different situations where there isn't a big explanation other than, you know, something just falls into your lap and there's a stroke of luck there. So I founded Carbon Ring Sports Group with this focus on motorsports in March of 2021. Well, in July of 2021, the NCAA made the announcement that student athletes were going to be able to make money off their name, image, and likeness, which is NIL, and really open a huge opportunity in this multi-billion-dollar industry of college sports for marketing and for branding of these college athletes that didn't have the opportunity to create their own brand before because they were prohibited. They had to be attached to the university team's branding, and the university got to capitalize on all of the TV revenue, all of the ticket sales generated from sports, and none of that money went to the athletes. And so in 2021, when the NCAA changed that ruling, we saw an opportunity to pivot into that market as well. And it really coincided with the brand mission of focusing on women's sports, focusing on building a platform for athletes to be able to share their voices with the world. And so Carbon Ring Sports Group in motorsports still has a strong mission to promote women in motorsports. I think there's a huge need for that and a big gap. It's still completely male dominated sport. And then when we're pivoting into college sports too, we're looking at volleyball, we're looking at swimming, track and field, women's basketball. Those are 4 huge sports for us, not only because of the opportunities that are there, but also because that's the direction we want to see sports media and sports opportunities move into, and sports marketing, and coordinate these opportunities with brands to say, hey, instead of spending your $5 million budget working with the star quarterback at your favorite university, why don't we spread that across more athletes and work with a college women's basketball star and a women's track and field star? You can still work with the quarterback. Just don't spend your entire budget on one player, and let's spread the love and understand, all right, what are the different audiences and what are the different unique opportunities that you can have now that you can work with a bunch of different athletes at different universities.
Yeah, I've seen that area is just blown up since they unlocked it. I mean, look at Caitlin Clark. Jeez Louise, right? Man, that's so freaking awesome.
It's almost funny. It's not really funny, but kind of ironic. She made more money in college through NIL than she's making as a professional in the WNBA.
I think it is pretty hilarious. I kind of read every now and then on the, why she didn't make it to the
Olympics?
The Olympics, right? I don't know. A lot of love and hate there, a lot of mixed messages, but she's awesome. She's definitely changing the game.
Those are the kinds of stories that we're wanting to replicate and duplicate across other teams in college sports and other athletes, because as awesome as Caitlin Clark is, I feel like there's 100 other women in college sports that could have the same star power as Caitlin Clark if given the right opportunity. And we see a gap in representation there of being able to go in and advocate for those athletes. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is say, hey, we love that Caitlin Clark is getting all this shine and we support it and we want it to continue to grow. And let's also take that and replicate it across other athletes so that the entire sport of women's basketball can grow. And that, I think that's a huge point of Caitlin being what I feel is snubbed off the Olympic team, because that's an opportunity to grow the sport. We have an athlete here who has more attention and more star power than we've ever seen in the sport. And she's being left off of the Olympic team. It only comes around every 4 years. 4 years from now, who knows if women's college basketball and women's professional basketball will be in the limelight like it is now.
I know the impact that she has on so many young women right now, and the sport itself. It really is interesting.
Absolutely.
The growth of women's sports.
And it teaches so much, especially, just keeping the conversation on her. But there's so many other athletes that are so well-rounded and are able to preach a lot more than just the importance of basketball. It's about being a good person. It's about being a good student. That was a good example, just Caitlin, but there's so many more women and men and that come from so many different backgrounds and then are afforded opportunities. So, you supporting that is amazing.
Right. Especially when you look at the statistics of how many college athletes make it to the professional level. It's less than 2%. And so you've got 98% of the college athletes who before 2021 didn't have an opportunity to build their own brand and to build their own following and their own revenue source from their sport.
Yeah.
And so now we've got all those opportunities, and it gives the media an incentive to tell these stories because everyone in college sports has a different story. And all of these different teams have so many different diverse backgrounds. And so that's what we're looking to do. And we're looking at some strategic partnerships too. I love to see companies like NBC invest in NIL, and they're investing in different media outlets to tell these stories. And so that's something that we're looking to do, is get a lot of these college athletes on TV that they wouldn't ordinarily have the opportunity to be on Peacock or NBC or NBCU, especially with the Olympics coming up, with NBC being the broadcast partner for the Olympics. Some of these track and field stars from UCLA, some of the swimmers from University of Virginia, they're going to be featured on NBC this summer at the Olympics. But what is NBC doing to tell their individual personal story along with their athletic ability? That's something that we're looking on partnering with them right now to create human interest stories and to promote the athletes for who they are and where they come from versus just their accomplishments in their sport.
So what's your biggest form of outreach now to these athletes? How do you find these athletes? How do they find you? Is it referral based? Is it?
There's a bunch of different ways that we get in contact with athletes. One is we've got a social media team that's constantly reaching out to athletes on social media. We've got a team that I lead that reaches out directly to the universities. So we, a lot of the time, begin the conversation with the athletic director and the head of compliance at a university to become an NIL partner at the university. And then we start to be introduced to athletes once we have that connection with the university as a whole. Coaches are a great way to get in touch with athletes. We'll go to a coach, show them our company's mission, show them some examples of what we've done for different athletes, and say, hey, we'd love to be able to do this with your team too. So UNC Charlotte football is one that's on the radar for us, that we're working on getting some meetings scheduled with the head coach to say, hey, here's what we're doing, especially in our local community. We're working with Winthrop University. We're looking at a partnership with UNC Greensboro. We want to be partnered with UNC Charlotte as well, and just focus on some of our immediate local community to say, here's what we're doing with different athletes. How can we help UNC Charlotte football? And then have the coach go back to the team and say, hey, anyone who's interested in NIL representation and wants to be connected with these different marketing plans and these different branding opportunities, reach out to Carbon Ring Sports Group and they'll take care of you.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Is there any limitations on, can they start promoting themselves and having sponsorships like the first year they're in college? So it starts that soon?
It does. There are some states that allow high school athletes to start doing NIL deals. Yeah.
You know, just thinking about it, you can kind of tell, like, when you've got some star power in a high school student and they just sign somewhere, there's a lot of media, there's a lot of press. Oh yeah. Yeah. You can tell that they're going to, you know, do some things like make a big impact. So yeah, those commitment videos, those 5-star recruits in football, when they're deciding which university they're going to, those videos get millions of views. Yes. And so if you got a beverage sitting on the table or you're wearing a specific hat or something, I mean, you can really start to establish that brand relationship early on. Wow. Depending on the different state laws. Yes. Yes. I never realized how big of a city, you know, football city, Rock Hill is. That's what they call it. I read that they produce like the most NFL athletes in football. And I was they produce a bunch. Really? Absolutely. Well, you know, my son transitioned to Northwestern High School. He played his first year of football in the 10th grade. And he was like, Dad, I want to play football. I was like, oh, you never played football. Like, these kids have been playing since 6 years old, right? Since they could walk. But he got in there, he put in the work, he hit the gym, and, you know, now he's defensive end. And he loves it. Like, and their system, what they put in place, is not to develop good football players. They want to develop quality men, which I really find, you know, really ethical. You know, I went and sat in and talked with a coach, and when he told me that, I was like, dude, this is freaking awesome. And since he's been involved, I can see the growth in my son, you know, and the accountability, you know, and to looking out for his health and fitness.
Yeah.
You know, even at
Sports
a young
teach
age.
so much.
Like, man, it took me till I was like 35 to learn this stuff.
Leadership, you know, being on time, being organized.
I mean, man, I'm very awesome. You know, and that competitive edge, you can't teach, right? You've got to be involved. And I think it's the same thing in business, right? That's why you find a lot of entrepreneurs that kind of took different paths. They didn't get that competitive edge from going to college, right? And graduating and saying, hey, I'm already a step above this person. You know, you've got another person that's been in there living it for 4 years, right? I found some of my best talent, you know, in digital marketing from people that may have been in fields like and working out of their basement, like affiliate marketing, right?
Right.
They were great at visibility. Like, I'm just like, hey, why don't we segue this into this? And they would kill it. You know, they would get like 1,000 backlinks in a month. Site just zoom up. I'm like, man, that's awesome. Anyway, that's some good stuff. Fears right now. You're a new entrepreneur. Well, fairly new, 3-4 years. You got.
I consider myself new.
Yeah. I mean, but you're
That's
doing
a good outlook to have
This
still,
is
though.
This is a good guy.
Yeah.
I met this guy at the Hornets game, and we just hit it off. He knows his stuff, guys. So, you know, he's got a lot of experience. He's got an old soul. I like it. Good intuition. That's what it takes a lot of times. It's intuition. You know, data could take you this far, but intuition takes you the rest of the way, right?
Yeah.
Risk tolerance. That's the big one. So we talked about it a little bit about replacing yourself. I guess right now, if other business owners or they're thinking about starting a business, what's the biggest hurdles and challenges that you're facing while you're trying to grow both businesses, one business? How do you see that playing out? Or
yeah, I'd say one of the biggest challenges is that scalability, right? As I'm building a team and I'm looking to find where people fit in and getting people, you know, utilizing their strengths and their talents. Like you're saying, it doesn't necessarily matter where you went to school, what level of education you have, what your background is. Everyone has, you know, different experiences that can play into different roles on a team. And so that's what I'm trying to do, because when I first started out with Carbon Ring Consulting and Carbon Ring Sports Group, it was just me. I was a solo entrepreneur, single member LLC. And so I was used to doing everything on my own for the first 1.5 to 2 years. And so then when I started to bring on members of my team, it was tough for me to relinquish some of that control. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And I go back to the client relationships of establishing that trust. Sometimes it's hard to establish that trust internally on both sides to say, all right, my team has to trust me as a leader to know that I'm steering the ship in the right direction. And then I have to trust them with their responsibilities so that they can help scale and build the business and build the operations. Because if you want to be a multi-million-dollar company, you can't do it all by yourself. And so that's been the number one hurdle for me, is trying to understand, all right, where are the best places for my team to thrive? And then as I grow, who am I adding on to the team, and how does that impact team culture and company culture and the brand identity? Because when you're small, 5-6 people, the next person that you add has a pretty significant impact on what your brand looks like and how that impacts the culture and who's getting along with who. And so that's something that I'm learning now, especially at the age that I'm at, not having had a lot of leadership or management experience in my corporate career. I'm learning all of this stuff now on the fly. And
it's the best way.
Yeah, it can be a challenge, but like you said, I'm relying a lot on intuition and just taking it day by day.
So do you see, I imagine Carbon Ring Sports and Carbon Ring Consulting, they kind of play off each other.
Absolutely.
Bit, right?
They're very symbiotic. And they have a very, collaborative kind of relationship as two different business entities, where one is focused a lot on marketing strategy, and then the other is focused on sports and building the brand of athletes. Well, sports marketing sits in between. So when I'm going to a company, whether it's a small business or a Fortune 500 company, and I'm talking to them about their marketing strategy, where does influencer marketing and sports marketing fit into that? And how can they partner with athletes to tell authentic stories and brand stories to reach people in a way that actually persuades them to take some sort of action, whether it's signing up for a subscription or buying a product? People are going to resonate a lot more with someone that they have a lot in common with, or has an identity with something that they're a fan of, whether it's sports or whether it's another part of an athlete's background that can reach an audience a little bit more on a personal level, better than a brand putting a commercial out saying, hey, please buy our product.
So do you ever see one outgrowing the other one, or one kind of engulfing the other one? Or do you see them always kind of being in separate lanes to give you more opportunity with your audience?
I definitely see the sports group outgrowing the consulting group, because I think there's an opportunity in college sports that we don't even know how large it is yet. And we're just scratching the surface. There's not often you find a multi-billion-dollar industry hit a reset button like we've seen in the last 3 years with the NCAA and athletes, college athletes being able to monetize their own personal brand. And so we now have this, I guess it's kind of a vacuum, this multi-billion-dollar vacuum, and we're trying to figure out who's going to fill in that space. I think Carbon Ring, because of when we started and how we've positioned ourselves in the marketplace, Carbon Ring Sports Group has an opportunity to grow to become a really massive company. And our mission is to be able to work with that 98% of athletes that isn't going to make it to the NFL or the NBA. And so when we're focusing on that vast majority, I think we're going to be able to grow and develop those relationships with the different athletes and universities to say, hey, we're focused on development, like you're talking about with your son's football coach. We're not in business to make these athletes a boatload of money. That is a side effect and a byproduct of if we're doing things the right way to prepare them for their careers and prepare them for life, whether it's as a pro athlete or not, then the money will come, because we're wanting to build athletes, personas, and brands to make them more marketable, yes, but we're also wanting to make them more successful in life. So we've got partnerships with career opportunities for student athletes. There's this technology company called First String that they've built an app that helps student athletes enter the job market when they're graduating from college. And so a lot of student athletes we found in our conversations and our experience, because a lot of our team members at Carbon Ring Sports Groups are former college athletes as well, with their lived experiences and what we're observing with our college athlete clients is they focus all their time and energy on school and practice. They're not focused on their resume. They're not focused on building interview skills, and they're not focused on building a career path for themselves. And so what First String has built is an app that really takes them through all those steps and can help set them apart when they're entering that job market. And it also is a great resource for employers to go in and say, hey, I know I'm getting a college athlete who they can look at their resume and see that they made good grades, but they also know this person has that competitive edge from playing a sport, and they've competed at a high level. They've learned teamwork. They've learned all of these different things. And now it's about translating that into a professional career.
Yeah, and I completely agree. They may not make it to the NFL or the NBA or whatever professional league, but they still have a story. And everybody deems success differently. They may start a ministry, a worldwide ministry. They may have a huge nonprofit, which you could be a part of that story. You can help tell that story, that origin story. Right. And I think that's so impactful. You know, it can really help push their mission, no matter what success looks like.
Absolutely.
They can be an entrepreneur, you know, who knows? And just it just whatever.
And the symbiotic relationship between the two carbon ring companies, we're trying to educate athletes on branding, on social media, to say, hey, if you do want to go on to start your own nonprofit, start your own business, go into a career in marketing, here's some tools to use your platform to understand, all right, how do I grow a following? How do I build a brand? And a lot of those skills and concepts are replicable, whether it's entrepreneurship, nonprofit work, or just going to work for a brand in their marketing department.
Wow. So that really gives them a jump start.
Absolutely. That's what we're trying to do.
I love that.
I've seen that firsthand too. Coming from the college athletic space, there's been really talented people that put all of the focus on the sport. And although there's been promotion from the school of, you got to be well-rounded, you got to do more outside of the sport. It's hard. It's difficult. And after that, like you said, 98% don't play professionally. They're going to be entering the workforce. I've seen people really struggle with that. So I think that you're doing a really big thing here for student athletes and giving them also that representation, because I've seen students that have had that talent not be afforded opportunities due to money, due to lack of exposure. So with that, that's an amazing opportunity for a lot of kids. Really cool.
Right.
Just wanted to say that.
Exposure.
They got 6 a.m. workouts and they got class all day.
Absolutely.
Then they got walkthroughs with coaches. They got meetings with coaches. Where's the time to dedicate to anything else?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hardly nothing.
Right.
I think my son's got 1 week off this summer and we're going to the beach.
Exactly.
Yes, and that's high school. With college, it's, even in the summer, you can't have internships a lot of times because you're doing workout packets. You're back at school 3 weeks early to be preparing for the fall season. So it's definitely a big struggle.
That's a huge thing for us too, is internships, right? We hire a lot of college student athletes or students in sports management programs to intern with us to teach them a little bit more about how to grow the NIL industry and how to create the opportunities for these student athletes, like we're talking about, to say, all right, how are we molding the next generation to think a little bit bigger beyond just a sport or just a degree, and think, all right, what are the opportunities long term for understanding branding, for understanding marketing, for understanding other, whatever they want to go down the career path of.
They probably bring the best perspective as well, because they have boots on the ground. They have the real time insight of telling you what's working, what's not, with teammates, classmates.
Right. And relating with other athletes.
Yeah.
Because it's all relationship based at the end of the day. And so when we're establishing a relationship with a college football player, a college swimmer, it helps if we've got a retired college swimmer or retired college football player on the team who can go and relate to them on that one-to-one basis to say, hey, I've been in your shoes. I understand. A lot of the people we're working with didn't have the NIL opportunity because it didn't exist back then, but they can still say, hey, I know what it's like to be getting up at 6 a.m. for those workouts and to be out on the field and to be taking those hits.
Yeah. And
how does that translate into your bigger picture of you as a person?
Yeah, they definitely deserve to be rewarded.
I love it. Marketing, one thing, from who you work with, from who you consult with right now, is there a common gap that you see a lot of these companies and brands that they're kind of underplaying right now?
I think it's what you talk about a lot, which is that branding identity. Because with where we are with social media and where we are industry-wide with digital marketing, these companies want to talk about omni-channel marketing. They want to talk about data analytics. They want to talk about ROI. And they set up these brilliant paid search campaigns, paid social media campaigns, all these different campaigns. But what they forget is what's going into those campaigns is the brand. What does that creative look like? What is the brand perception, and what is your brand identity when you're reaching all these millions of people with all these digital impressions? Because you can set a campaign up perfectly right, and you're not going to resonate with your audience because you haven't built a brand that has a community, or you haven't built a brand that really speaks to that audience. And so I think that gets overlooked a lot because it's, like you said, very difficult to tie that back to an ROI metric. And so that's something that I see more and more companies are failing to have a consistent brand identity across their different channels. They'll have one brand identity on social media. They'll have another brand identity with their PR. They'll have another brand identity when they're producing a TV commercial. It's like these channels and these marketing campaigns do not need to be siloed. In fact, you can probably speak to this better than me. They all work together a lot better if you've got one holistic, cohesive brand message and brand identity across all your different platforms.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing to for a company to understand and get. You know, they're looking for that one magic bullet, right? It's not. It's, you know, you need a machine gun nowadays. It's noisy. You got to be bold. You got to tell your story loud on multiple channels.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to be a little controversial too.
Yeah, a little bit.
I think with, like we mentioned, Prime, they use their following, which isn't always, like we said, negative response is a good response sometimes, because it means that you're breaking through the noise, being seen.
Yeah, those guys receive more hate on social media than anyone I've ever seen before. And they're wildly successful, both with their channels and their brand Prime. And so I think part of that plays into it is controversy does sell, especially in this social media age, where if you understand the algorithm and how things get promoted by the social media platforms, engagement isn't measured as positive or negative. It's just measured as engagement. So if you have thousands, maybe millions of people commenting, they could all say they hate you, and you're going to be promoted to be number one because you've got all this brand engagement on social media.
Yeah, you can hate me now. Hashtag. I had the joy of going into like a little micro session with Damon John at Shark Tank a couple weeks ago. Wow. He's making an effort to come back to smaller communities. He came to Rock Hill and Winthrop. Really? And, you know, get small groups and talk about the impact of gathering. He feels like, especially with, you know, everything shut down, it also opened up a lot of digital spaces, like digital experiences, which is great. But the human connection experience has been kind of, you know, lackluster. You know, talked about, you know, meeting like we are now and going over ideas, how you can read people's faces, how you can get inspiration, how I, you know, if I'm like, hey, Ben and Zan, hey, go attack this. And then I see you kind of slant your eyes and Zan's like, you know, and I can pull you over. What's going on? Zan's like, I don't feel comfortable in this. You know, you get that real time, you know, that cutting edge, that creative burst that is kind of lacking because everything now is virtual, right? I mean, it opened up the doors for more opportunities globally, but also it's been closing the doors on inspiration and collaboration. You know, it's hard to sit on a Zoom call with 12 people and run a business, run an organization and really hone in.
What I saw too, just about that point, people mentioned, you know, the lack of creativity and inspiration right now, just in the world, whether it's marketing but like if you go to the movies, how many of them are prequels, sequels, remakes? It's actually crazy that looking at all of the blockbuster movies right now in theaters, nothing is brand new.
I mean, nowadays, this is hard, right? You know, most solutions are new generations of problems that have existed, and you're just making the solution better. But he was just saying, you know, that those handshakes, it's hard to give someone a handshake and look them in the eye and lie to them, right? It's easy to zone out on Zoom, right? Listen for 30 minutes. Oh, I did my part. And then you're just in outer space for
especially if someone's got the camera off and they're muted. I mean, they might not be paying attention at all.
So, and I'm not saying you can't work that way. It takes certain kind of people and personalities, right? So it's important to know somewhat what their disc profiles are. Some people can tell, but if you can't tell, I would suggest going through a disc profile for any new hires. That way you kind of learn their strengths, their weaknesses, how to communicate to them effectively. You know, communicating on video may not be the best way to communicate. But I was pretty blown away by this initiative. I was like, man, and I was like, maybe that's why I felt this urge to come out and do the podcast and really push for in person. You know, I just came back from Nashville. I just took this thing to Nashville. It was like a 7.5 hour drive. Just rocked me, you know, physically, mentally. I'm still 100% spiritually, but everything else was gone. But it was so important. I was just thinking that if I did those on Zoom, they would have been way different. The
Absolutely.
outcome would have been way different than just having them, real conversation. People cried, people broke down. It was, just real stories. And
that human element's really important.
I really want to focus on bringing that H to H back, that human connection.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you since you're a business owner, you've built a business. Everything that we do at Carbon Ring right now is totally remote. All of our employees are remote. We don't have any physical office locations. How do you manage and how do you build your team, both physical and remote, in this day and age? And what value do you put on, in-person teamwork at an office versus collaboration virtually?
Well, when I started TA 10 years ago, it was kind of unique. I started it kind of hybrid. Prior to that, on the traditional agency, fancy office, blah, 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 bring them in, look how cool we are. It's like, man, I really can't get into the brand that way. I should be at their place more than they should be at mine. I was like, so what do I have an office for? Well, it's a cool place to collab, have meetings. So maybe I can find something in between. So I found a small kind of flex office that we utilized, and we would utilize it, 2 to 3 times a week. But the other majority of the times I would insist that we would meet at our partner's location. So me personally, that's how I get a feel for the brand. And it's just all intuition, really. I meet with them, see how their culture is, see how they work. Is it a bad environment, good environment? Is it, what is it? What builds this brand? What makes it tick? So I started that way before it was cool. Didn't have a lot of overhead, which was awesome. So it didn't take much to pay the bills, per se. And then just as I continue to grow, I always try to come up with opportunities for us to gather. Like, I think tomorrow we're gathering at the office, right? And like Zan, she'll do some fun TikTok videos and this and that. We'll talk about client stuff.
It's really hard to show our brand personality, I found, through doing like social media for remote. How are you, us filming together and taking pictures together and writing content together is always the best, the option. But I know that, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that has been a huge struggle for us, is establishing content creation and establishing a consistency remotely when we're all building different pieces of content online individually.
We've definitely struggled with that. I think even if you're meeting at a coffee shop, we've gone to Top Golf, we've done, bowling, something like that, whether it doesn't have to be in the office work session, but, brainstorming together, doing something fun, unique, and also taking those pictures and videos, because that's, a really good selling point of seeing brand personality on social.
And that's one thing, the biggest thing that I've learned, you've got to be intentional about working on your own brand as you do your part. It's easy to get lost into it because you want to see all your partners just be totally successful. So you put all your energy and effort into them, right? And I didn't touch none of my stuff for like 8 years. I mean, ran a few PPC campaigns, this and that, posted every now and then. And it worked out, right? Referrals, word of mouth, got a few leads in here or there. I didn't intentionally start pushing the brand until about 2 years ago. And I found that was difficult. I almost had to bring in another person or new people. We just got an intern in, and he's freaking awesome. And I got him mainly focused on TA. When Zan came in, mainly focused on TA. And what's cool is, as I started developing a lot of these offshoots, it gave us another reason to get together and talk, like on the podcast, right? And we're going to do a 10-year podcast if we can get everybody together. But, during the summer stuff.
The summer is tough.
Vacations, Megan's always going to Italy or something. Zan's always flying.
No, I'm going to Greece now next month.
Yeah. See? So
that's going to be.
Yeah, but that's also amazing for the opportunities when we can work from home. I'm going to be working during it, calling into the team, and also having some fun, hanging out the beach.
Oh, totally.
That's awesome. So you got to be very intentional and put in that extra effort, spend that extra revenue and invest. I invested a lot. Everything that I make, I put back into the organization and building the brands. It's just creating that atmosphere to collaborate, so you can have both. And, right now I'm always got something going on. I've been looking at buildings, because I want to create almost like a mini incubator here in the local area. It's missing. So I'm imagining almost just like this huge collaborative workspace, right? To where, all my peeps can come in and hang out. I can have a studio for rent. I can have our studio there. I can have a space, for events if they want to rent. I may sublease a couple offices, a coffee shop, kind of that, a creative incubator. That's kind of what I want to focus my attention on next. I'll still keep the mobile studio, but a place I can lay my hat. That's kind of what I'm working on.
I've been toying around with the idea of opening an office in Columbia, South Carolina, because University of South Carolina is one of the bigger football teams in the area. They're in the SEC. I know Clemson's huge too, but they're not too far away. So I think Columbia could be a cool hub for that NIL office and have a place where athletes can come in to create a studio there for them to shoot content. We have a partner down in Atlanta called the Players Lounge. And what they do is it's founded by two college athletes, Aaron Murray and Keith Marshall. And they have created a content platform for athletes in the spirit of NIL and sharing these athlete stories and giving fans an opportunity to see a different side of these athletes. And so we're partnering with them on different content pieces, right? They've built an incredible social media following. They've got a studio down there, but it's a little bit far from here to get athletes down to Atlanta. So we're trying to replicate and build some studio space and build an office for athletes to come and engage with agents and, sit down and do brainstorming for different marketing deals. And so that's something that we've been toying around with is opening our first physical office down in Columbia.
Oh, that's cool, man.
That's awesome.
Well, hey, I wish nothing but the best for you, my man. And, just the next best thing. That's all I can say. Entrepreneurship is just taking that next step. Our first podcast was a hot mess. Nothing turned on. We laughed for about 45 minutes. It was horrible. And I said, just post it. I don't care. I want people to see what it looks like to kind of step out and step in. And since then, I'm constantly trying to grow. I'm constantly taking master classes. I realized that I needed to work on my presentation skills, my communication skills. I want to do a book. So now I've got to take writing classes. You never start learning, stop learning and growing. That's the thing. But as you progress as a person, as an entrepreneur, you'll eventually need to have someone to kind of take that Ben spot, that old Ben spot, because you're in this new Ben spot, right? You're this master consultant, right, in the sports field. And I think the hardest thing that I found was letting go, is because you always feel like if I didn't do it, it wasn't good enough, So I'm constantly that's the hardest part, is letting go, is letting people kind of thrive and understand that their stuff might be different, right? And let's face it, design is subjective, but design principles are not. So which I've constantly got to pound into people. But that was the hardest part, just letting go of this, letting go of that, letting go. And I'm like, man, it's okay. The world's still here, right? It's like,
my thing too is leading by example, but that doesn't always mean you have to do it yourself. But that's been the approach I've been taking, is like, well, if I do this and I do it well, then I'm leading by example, and they'll see that I'm in the trenches with them. I'm still doing all the, necessary things that I want them to be doing. I don't want to tell anyone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. But then it's like you're saying, letting go and build that framework for leading by example, but then be able to take a step back and fill a different role as a executive versus someone who's, you know, wearing all the different hats all at once.
Yeah, it's like when I used to build websites. I used to do it all, right? Soup to nuts, you name it. I can build a brand from scratch and have my hands in everything. And at some point I was like, yeah, let the next generation take over, right? Let the next guru. I would find the people that just were diehard web developers and say, you know what? You learn the next best thing. You tell me, you know, I'm not gonna go back in and build websites, right? But I need to stay at, you know, somewhat at risk of what's going on, right? Keep me tuned in. I need to keep my pulse in. Like, this is the next. Okay, cool. I got it. You know, algorithm. Yeah. Okay. Got it. You know, so I try to keep a high level pulse, but you know, now me designing a website, geez, it'd take me 2 weeks to probably get a WordPress site up. You know, it's just the next best thing, right? You got to cut it off at some point. So now I'm kind of focused on this other arena and growing in that arena. You know, I realized, I said, man, I've been doing this for 20 years and nobody knows who I am, right? I've never been intentional about my personal brand. You know, it's all been client focused, work related. Right. I said, let's go, let's do it. I think I got a lot of wisdom but I'm also a baby, you know, at all this new stuff because you realize you've got 20 years of experience in this, but now you need to pivot to where, well, now you're teaching about this 20 years of experience, you know, the knowledge that you gain, the trials, the tribulation, what you've learned, the downfalls, pitfalls, and just hoping you can give someone just one nugget, right? I mean, that's my hopes, and I can at least impact one person with one nugget. Maybe. Depends on the day. Depends on how I'm feeling.
No, I love what you're doing with the podcast.
Yeah.
It, man.
Building your own personal brand so that you can share that experience and that wealth of information with everyone, but then also what you're trying to do with setting the next generation up with incubators and with, you know, involvement in the community. I have a ton of respect for that and can't wait to see how you're going to continue to evolve and impact our community. Because I think that's something that's really important to me is this Charlotte, Rock Hill, Columbia, all these surrounding areas. How can we all work together and make this a real hub for different industries, whether it's sports or marketing or branding, and compete with the New Yorks and the LAs and the Chicagos of the world? Because I don't think I would have had an opportunity to do what I'm doing if it hadn't been for a lot of companies and individuals being open to remote access and remote partnerships. Because before, when I was working for Omnicom Media Group, we were just a satellite office here in Charlotte. And the majority of the main work was being done in New York or San Francisco or LA. And so I really want Charlotte to be in that list, and Rock Hill and the whole metro area to be in that list of, all right, we're going with a New York agency or we're going with a Charlotte agency, and have some weight behind that. It's going to take people like us to promote all this and to, you know, take that leap of faith and be unafraid to put yourself out there.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
And they truly have merged. I feel like this area is kind of just merged into
it's
a big
all just
bubble.
growing and growing.
You know, I was in Valentine before I moved here 6 years ago, and it was nothing. Now it's like, I go there and I'm like, well, what is this? You know, they started building a putt-putt course. I was like, babe, we got to get out of here. It's like right around the corner. I was like, this is getting pretty crazy. And
Rock Hill's doing some cool stuff. BMX World Championships, the Cornhole League is headquartered here. I mean,
It was almost the Panthers' new stadium too, right?
I could throw a rock to it.
Yeah.
It's right there, 400 acres. Like, you could literally throw a rock from right here and hit it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they got a lot going on. And yeah, the Frisbee, they have the World Championship Frisbee disc golf, I believe that's what you call it. Who knows? Maybe they'll be the home of spike ball or the next or the next great thing.
Yeah, something to do with pickleball here or something.
Oh yeah.
Keep your eyes out for Winthrop Cornhole, man. They're building a cornhole team.
Wow. And they got the practice facility. I mean, they got it here. It's homegrown. Why not?
Yeah.
Right?
So it's going to be really, really awesome to see this Rock Hill community start to dip its toes in different things. Like you're saying, frisbee, cornhole.
I've been looking for a client to sponsor a ACL. I'm like, man, that would just be fun, right?
That would be fun. We already have one Crystal in the bare knuckle sponsoring her. That's fun.
Yes. And Ben knows Crystal quite well.
Yeah.
See, the lovely Crystal, the lovely.
Yeah. She's awesome.
Can't wait to see her next challenge.
Yeah, she's gearing up for a pro boxing competition. So
awesome.
We're real excited for her. I know she's going to bounce back and
absolutely
and really, make a great name for herself and put on a great performance here.
Absolutely.
I think she's fighting in July.
It's exciting. We'll have to get that date.
It's right around the corner.
Yeah.
All right, Ben. Well, thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Brand Podcast. We would love to have you back on.
Yeah.
In the future.
To come back. Yeah.
Because I feel like we just
scratched the surface.
Yeah. Scratch the surface. So whenever we get together, I feel like we could talk all day about this stuff, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's when you're passionate about stuff and just loving seeing brands thrive, right? It's
so many unique too. You're stepping out into a new space. It's really awesome.
Thank you.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Well, thanks everybody.
Check the link in the description below for our ebook. Sign up. Follow us on socials. Thank you.
And we'll have Ben if they want to follow you and get your information.
Your LinkedIn.
What's the best way?
So follow us, Carbon Ring Group on Instagram. I can give you a link for the LinkedIn in the bio. And carbonringsportsgroup.com.
Awesome.
All
right.
Check us out. Peace.
Bye.
Thanks for listening and joining us on the Love Your Brand podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode, and remember, share the love.